The massive ship dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light. Commander Sarah Chen Nakamura stood on the bridge of Retribution's Dawn, her hands gripping the metal rail so tight her knuckles turned white. Around her, dozens of crew members worked at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of computer screens. "Sensors online," called out Lieutenant Torres from his position. "Beginning full system scan." Sarah's heart pounded as she waited. After 10,000 years, humanity had returned to the place where it all began, the place where everything ended. "Ma'am," Torres said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm reading the Sol system. It's all here." The main screen flickered to life, showing a view of space that should have been familiar. The sun still burned bright and yellow, just as it had when her ancestors last saw it. But everything else was wrong. Where Earth should have been a blue and green jewel, Sarah saw only a black dead rock. No clouds swirled around it. No light sparkled on its night side. The planet that had given birth to humanity was nothing but a burned cinder floating in the void. "Jesus," whispered Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's head scientist. He stepped up, beside Sarah, his old face pale with shock. "They really did it. They actually destroyed everything." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of the stories her grandmother had told her. Stories of blue skies and green trees, of oceans that stretched to the horizon, of cities filled with millions of people living their lives in peace. All of it was gone. "What about the moon?" she asked, opening her eyes again. Torres worked his controls and the image shifted. The moon appeared on screen, but it too was wrong. Massive craters scarred its surface, far bigger than the old impact, sites Sarah had seen in history books. These were new wounds made by alien weapons. "Mars next," Sarah ordered. The red planet came into view, but it was no longer red. Huge sections of its surface had been carved away, leaving deep scars in the rock. Entire mountains were missing. It looked like someone had taken a giant spoon and scooped out pieces of the world. "They strip-mined it," Webb said quietly. "Took everything valuable and left the rest to rot." Sarah felt anger building in her chest, hot and fierce. The Zarthak had not just killed her people's homeworld. They had desecrated it. They had turned humanity's birthplace into a monument to their own cruelty. "Commander," Torres called out, his voice urgent, "I'm picking up something strange." "What is it?" "Energy readings. Very faint, but they're coming from Earth's surface. Something down there is still active." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. It's weak, but it's definitely there. Looks like some kind of power source, maybe multiple sources all underground." Around the bridge, crew members began to murmur to each other. Sarah held up her hand for silence. "Could it be Zarthak equipment?" she asked. Webb shook his head. "The energy signature is wrong. This looks more like fusion reactors. Human fusion reactors." The implications hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. If there were human reactors still running on Earth, that meant survivors, she whispered. "That's impossible," said Captain Rodriguez, her second in command. "No one could survive down there for 10,000 years. The planet was glassed. The atmosphere was burned away." But Webb was already working at his console, running calculations. "Actually," he said slowly, "it might be possible. If they went deep enough underground before the bombardment started, if they had enough supplies, and the right equipment." Sarah turned to face her crew. These were good people, all of them. They had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment, training to fight the aliens who had destroyed their ancestors' home. Many of them had never seen a real planet, having been born on the great ships of the Exodus fleet. "Torres, I want a full scan of the entire planet. Look for any sign of human technology, human life, anything at all. Webb, start analyzing those energy signatures. I want to know everything about them." "Yes, ma'am," both men replied. Sarah walked to the front of the bridge and stared out at the dead world on the screen. Her great-great-grandmother had been there when Earth died. She had been one of the lucky few to escape on the last evacuation ships, watching from space as alien weapons turned her homeworld into a burning wasteland. The old woman had lived to be 130, spending her final years telling stories to anyone who would listen. Stories about what Earth had been like before the Zarthak came. Stories about the desperate fight to save what they could of human civilization. And stories about the promise every human had made as they fled into the dark between the stars. They would return. They would come back stronger. And they would make the aliens pay for what they had done. "Commander," Webb said, breaking her thoughts. "I'm getting more detailed readings now. These energy sources are definitely human technology, but they're old, very old. They've been running continuously for thousands of years. How many sources are we talking about?" "Hard to say exactly, but at least 50, maybe more. They're spread across the planet, mostly concentrated under what used to be major population centers." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 50 underground. Installations, all still active after 10 millennia. That meant there had been planning, preparation. Some humans had known what was coming and had made ready for it. "Ma'am," Torres interrupted, "I'm detecting ships." "Zarthak?" Sarah asked, her hand moving instinctively to her weapon. "No, ma'am. They're human ships. Small ones, moving between the underground sites. They're using some kind of stealth technology, but our new sensors can pick them up." The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the screen as tiny dots of light moved across the surface of the dead world. Human ships, flown by human hands, still operating in the ruins of humanity's birthplace. "How long since we've been detected?" Sarah asked. "Unknown, ma'am. But if they've been watching us since we arrived..." A new voice suddenly filled the bridge, speaking from the communication system. It was clearly human, but the accent was strange, old-fashioned. "Unknown fleet. This is the Terra Defense Network. You are in violation of restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately, or you will be fired upon." Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing her own amazement reflected in their faces. Someone on Earth was still alive, still fighting, still defending a world that had been dead for 10,000 years. She stepped forward to the communication station. "Terra Defense Network, this is Commander Sarah Chen Nakamura of the Terran Exodus Fleet. We are the descendants of those who fled Earth during the Great Burning. We have returned home." A long pause followed. Then the voice came back, softer, now filled with disbelief. "Exodus Fleet? You actually came back?" "Yes," Sarah said, her own voice thick with emotion. "We promised we would return. It took us 10,000 years, but we kept our word." Another pause. Then a different voice, older and more formal. "Commander Chen Nakamura, this is Elena Vasquez, current guardian of the Unbowed. We have much to discuss, but not over open channels. The Zarthak still have listening posts in this system. Can you send a small ship to the following coordinates?" Numbers appeared on Sarah's screen, marking a location on Earth's night side. "We'll be there," Sarah said. "And Elena, thank you. Thank you for keeping the light burning." "Thank you for coming home," came the reply. As the communication ended, Sarah found herself thinking about the long journey that had brought them here. 10,000 years of wandering the galaxy, fighting and learning and growing stronger. 10,000 years of preparing for this moment. The Exodus fleet was not the same desperate collection of refugee ships that had fled Earth all those centuries ago. They had rebuilt themselves, improved themselves, made themselves into something the Zarthak would regret ever crossing. Their ships were larger now, more powerful, armed with weapons that could crack planets and defended by shields that could turn aside anything the aliens could throw at them. Their people were stronger too, enhanced by genetics and technology that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors. But most importantly, they were united by a single purpose. Every man, woman, and child in the fleet knew why they were here. They had come to reclaim their homeworld and to make the Zarthak pay for the crime of destroying it. "Rodriguez," Sarah said, turning to her second-in-command, "prepare the shuttle. I want a team of 12, all volunteers. We're going, down to meet our cousins." "Ma'am, is that wise? We don't know what conditions are like down there." Sarah smiled grimly. Captain, we've spent 10,000 years preparing to come home. I'm not going to let a little radiation stop me now. As her crew prepared for the mission, Sarah stood, alone at the front of the bridge, staring down at the scarred surface of Earth. Somewhere down there, in the deep places beneath the burned soil, humans had survived. They had endured. They had kept the flame of civilization alive in the darkness. Soon she would meet them face to face. She would learn how they had managed to survive in hell for 10,000 years. And together, they would plan the next phase of humanity's return. The Zarthak thought they had destroyed humanity when they burned Earth. They thought they had sent a message to the galaxy about the price of defying their will. They were wrong. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had been forged in fire, tempered by hardship, and made stronger than it had ever been before. And now, at long last, the children of Earth had come home. The war for humanity's future was about to begin. The shuttle New Dawn descended through Earth's thin atmosphere, its hull glowing red from the heat of re-entry. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat, her enhanced eyes easily reading the instruments in the dim light. Behind her, 11 other members of the Exodus fleet prepared for their first steps on humanity's homeworld. Each of them represented something different about what humanity had become during their long exile. Lieutenant Torres was voidborn, his body adapted for life in zero gravity. His bones were denser than baseline humans, his reflexes faster, his vision adapted to see in the deep darkness between stars. Sergeant Kim was a Titan, her frame massive and powerful, her muscles enhanced with synthetic fibers that made her stronger than any human who had ever lived on old Earth. Dr. Webb was unenhanced, one of the few who chose to remain close to baseline, human genetics. But even he carried implants that let him interface directly with computer systems and process information at superhuman speeds. Landing zone coming up, Sarah announced, checking her instruments. The coordinates Elena Vasquez had given them led to what had once been the outskirts of Paris. Now it was just another stretch of blackened wasteland, broken only by the twisted remains of ancient buildings. As they settled down on the landing pad, Sarah could see that someone had cleared the area of debris. The landing zone was marked with lights that seemed to emerge from the ground itself. This was clearly not a natural formation. Atmosphere is breathable, reported Dr. Webb, checking his scanners. Thin, but we won't need masks. Sarah was surprised by this. According to all their records, Earth's atmosphere had been completely destroyed during the bombardment. How had it been restored? The answer came as soon as they stepped off the shuttle. The ground beneath their feet was not natural soil, but some kind of artificial covering. As Sarah knelt to examine it, she realized it was a sophisticated atmospheric processor, disguised to look like ordinary dirt. Impressive, Webb murmured, running his own scans. This entire area is one giant life support system. They've rebuilt the atmosphere from scratch. A section of ground nearby suddenly opened up, revealing a hidden elevator. 3 figures emerged, wearing simple gray uniforms that looked practical rather than military. The lead figure was a woman with iron gray hair and scars across her face. She moved with the confident stride of someone used to command. Commander Chen Nakamura, the woman asked, extending her hand. I'm Elena Vasquez, welcome to Earth. Sarah shook the offered hand, noting that Elena's grip was firm but not enhanced. These Earth humans were still baseline, unmodified by the genetic improvements that had become standard in the Exodus fleet. Guardian Vasquez, Sarah replied. It's an honor to meet you. When we learned there were survivors— Call me Elena, the older woman interrupted with a smile. We gave up on formal ranks about 7,000 years ago, and we prefer to be called the Unbowed, not survivors. We didn't just survive down here, we've been fighting. Elena gestured for them to follow her into the elevator. As they descended, Sarah noticed that the walls were lined with artwork. Not the grand murals she might have expected, but simple paintings and carvings that seemed to tell stories. These are beautiful, Dr. Webb said, pausing to examine a carving that showed humans working together to build something underground. Every generation adds to the record, Elena explained. We want to make sure that what we've done here is remembered, no matter what happens. The elevator dropped for what felt like minutes taking them deep underground. When the doors finally opened, Sarah gasped at what she saw. They emerged into a vast cavern, clearly artificial, that stretched away into the distance. The ceiling was covered with lights that mimicked sunlight, and the floor was laid out like a city street. Buildings lined both sides of the wide avenue, and Sarah could see people going about their daily business. "This is New Paris," Elena said proudly. "One of 53 underground cities we've built over the millennia, home to about 200,000 people." Sarah stared in amazement. The city was clearly human, but it was unlike anything she had seen in the Exodus fleet. Everything seemed designed for permanence, for generations of use. The buildings were solid stone and metal, built to last forever. Gardens grew in public squares, tended by people who clearly took pride in their work. "How many of you are there?" Sergeant Kim asked, her enhanced voice deeper than a normal human's. "Worldwide?" "About 12 million, Elena replied. "We're spread across all the continents, connected by tunnel systems and underground transport networks. 12 million humans living beneath the surface of a dead world for 10,000 years. Sarah felt a deep respect for these people who had chosen to stay and fight rather than flee to the stars. As they walked through the city, Sarah noticed that the people they passed were staring at her group, not with hostility, but with curiosity, and something that might have been awe. "They know who we are?" she asked. Elena nodded. "Word spreads fast down here. The return of the Exodus fleet is something we've been hoping for and planning for since the day you left." They entered a large building that seemed to serve as some kind of government center. Inside, Sarah saw more artwork covering the walls, but these pieces were different. They showed scenes of space battles, of great ships among the stars, of humans fighting alien enemies in distant systems. "You've been tracking us," Sarah realized. "As much as we could," Elena confirmed, leading them into a conference room. "We've had long-range sensors hidden throughout the system for millennia. We've watched some of your battles with the Zarthak. We've seen what you've become." She gestured for them to sit around a large table, made from what looked like a single piece of black stone. Other underground leaders filed into the room, all of them showing the same signs of lives lived in difficult conditions. These were hard people, Sarah realized, tough in a way that even the Exodus fleet's warriors might not be. "Tell us about the fleet," said an older man who introduced himself as Marcus Reeve, Elena's deputy. "How many ships? How many people?" Sarah looked around the table, making a quick decision. These people had earned the right to know the truth. "The Exodus fleet now consists of over 2,000 ships," she began. "Everything from small scouts to mobile battle stations the size of moons. Our total population is approximately 8 billion people." Murmurs of amazement went around the table. Elena leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. 8 billion? How is that possible? "Only about 50 million people escaped during the evacuation," Dr. Webb answered this time. "We've had 10,000 years to grow, and we've been very deliberate about it. We've also incorporated people from other species who joined us willingly." "Other species?" Marcus asked. "The galaxy is full of life," Sarah explained. "Not all of it hostile. We've encountered dozens of alien races over the millennia. Some became our allies. Some tried to enslave us like the Zarthak did. Those we fought and defeated. Those who offered friendship we welcomed." She paused, thinking about how to explain what humanity had become during their long exile. "We learned from every encounter," she continued. "Every battle taught us something new. Every alien technology we encountered, we studied and improved on. Every world we visited added to our knowledge." Elena nodded slowly. "And you've changed. Yourselves as well. I can see it in your people. They're not quite baseline human anymore." Sarah gestured to Lieutenant Torres, who stood and moved with the fluid grace of someone born in zero gravity. "The Voidborn are adapted for life on ships and in space. They can survive in hard vacuum for short periods, and they can see in near total darkness." Next, she indicated Sergeant Kim. "The Titans are our heavy assault troops, stronger and tougher than any baseline human, capable of going toe-to-toe with alien warriors twice their size." "What about you?" Elena asked, studying Sarah carefully. "What are you?" Sarah smiled. I'm a coordinator. Enhanced reflexes. Improved information processing, genetic modifications that let me interface directly with our ship's computers. I can see the entire tactical situation of a space battle in my head and make decisions faster than our enemies. Can react. And the others? Dr. Webb spoke up. There are the makers, our engineers and scientists. They can design and build new technologies on the fly, adapting to whatever challenges we face. The Scions serve as our long-range communicators and navigators. They can sense things across vast distances and guide our ships through hyperspace. Elena sat back in her chair, looking thoughtful. So you've become specialized. Different types of humans for different tasks. But we're still human, Sarah said firmly. That's the most important thing. No matter how we've changed our bodies, we've kept our minds and our souls human. We remember where we came from. We remember what was done to us. And we remember why we're fighting. Marcus leaned forward. Fighting. Yes, let's talk about that. What do you know about the current state of the Zarthak Empire? Sarah's expression darkened. We know they're still out there. Still enslaving species, still destroying worlds that resist them. We've fought them dozens of times over the centuries, but only small fleets, frontier forces. They're stronger now than they were when they destroyed Earth, Elena said quietly. Much stronger. They control over half the galaxy. Thousands of species serve them, either as slaves or as willing allies who profit from the Empire's expansion. She activated a holographic projector in the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Huge sections of it were colored red, representing Zarthak territory. This is what we're up against, Elena continued. They have fortress worlds that can build entire fleets in a matter of months. They have weapons that can crack planets. And they have something called the Final Harvest. What's that? Sarah asked, though she had a feeling she didn't want to know the answer. A plan to strip every habitable world in the galaxy of all useful resources, then sterilize them completely, Marcus replied. They want to turn the entire galaxy into their personal empire, with every other species either dead or serving them. Sarah felt the familiar anger building in her chest. How long do we have? According to our intelligence, they're preparing to begin the final harvest within the next 50 years, Elena said. Earth was their testing ground, the weapons they used to glass our world. They've been perfecting them, making them more efficient. Dr. Webb was studying the galactic map with professional interest. How do you know all this? I mean, how do you gather intelligence on an empire that spans half the galaxy? Elena smiled grimly. Because we haven't just been hiding down here. For 10,000 years. We've been building a network. The Zarthak think Earth is a dead world, so they pay no attention to it. That makes it the perfect base for coordinating resistance movements across the galaxy. The implications of what she was saying hit Sarah like a physical blow. You mean there are other resistance groups? Dozens of them, Marcus confirmed. Species that the Zarthak have enslaved but who never stopped fighting. Worlds that are supposedly loyal to the Empire, but who secretly work to sabotage it from within. Pirates and rebels and anyone else who refuses to bow down to Zarthak rule. And they all report to you? Sergeant Kim asked. Not to us specifically, Elena replied. But we coordinate with them, share intelligence, help them plan operations. Sometimes we even send our own people to assist with particularly important missions. Sarah stood up and walked to the holographic map, studying the red zones that represented enemy territory. Her people had spent 10,000 years preparing for this war, but they had always assumed they would be fighting it alone. What do you need from us? She asked finally. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. Everything, Elena said simply. Your ships, your people, your technology. The resistance movements have been holding the line for millennia, but they can't win on their own. They need someone with real military power to unite behind. You want us to lead a galactic rebellion? Sarah said, understanding. Yes, but it has to be done carefully. The Zarthak have spies everywhere. If they realize what's happening too soon, they'll accelerate the final harvest. We might only get one chance at this. Sarah looked around at her team, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. They had come home to reclaim their birth world, but they had found something bigger. A chance to free the entire galaxy from the tyranny that had destroyed Earth. "We'll need to bring the fleet in closer," she said finally. "And we'll need to coordinate with your resistance network. How soon can we start?" Elena smiled, and for the first time since their arrival, Sarah saw real hope in the older woman's eyes. "Commander," Elena said, "we've been ready for 10,000 years. The question is, are you ready to finish what our ancestors started?" Sarah looked one more time at the map, at the vast red zones representing alien oppression, and made her decision. "Yes," she said simply. "It's time to go to war." 3 weeks after first contact, Sarah stood in the deepest chamber of New Paris watching as technicians from both the Exodus fleet and the Unbowed worked together to integrate their computer systems. The chamber was massive, carved from solid rock and lined with technology that hummed with quiet power. "It's incredible," Dr. Webb said, examining one of the ancient terminals. "Some of this equipment has been running continuously for 9,000 years. Elena smiled as she joined them, carrying a cup of what she claimed was real coffee grown in the underground farms. "The original designers built everything to last. They knew we might be down here for a very long time." Sarah accepted the coffee, gratefully. After weeks of living on ship rations, anything fresh was a luxury. "Tell me about them, the original designers. How did they know what was coming?" Elena's expression grew serious. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." She led them deeper into the complex, through corridors lined with memorial plaques bearing thousands of names. At the center of it all was a circular chamber with walls covered in screens and displays. In the middle stood a simple stone monument. "This is the Hall of Memory," Elena explained. "Every human who died defending Earth is remembered here. Over 3 billion names." Sarah walked slowly around the monument, reading some of the inscriptions. Many were simple. John Smith died defending Shanghai. Others were longer. Maria Gonzalez gave her life buying time for the last evacuation ship to escape. The planners were a group of scientists and engineers who saw what was coming months before the final assault, Elena continued. They realized that not everyone would be able to evacuate, so they made preparations. One of the screens on the wall flickered to life, showing old video footage of humans working frantically to dig tunnels and install equipment. The people in the footage looked desperate but determined. Dr. Amanda Chen was the leader of the project, Elena said, and Sarah felt her breath catch. Your ancestor, actually. She designed most of these underground cities. The screen showed a woman who looked remarkably like Sarah, giving orders to work crews as explosions lit up the sky overhead. She was clearly exhausted, but her voice was steady and confident. We won't all make it to the ships, the recorded voice said, but that doesn't mean we give up. We go underground. We preserve what we can, and we make sure that when our people come back, they have something to come back to. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched her great-great-grandmother working to save what she could of human civilization. She stayed behind. She did, along with 50,000 others who volunteered to remain and maintain the underground cities. They could have taken places on the evacuation ships, but they chose to stay. Elena activated another screen, showing a map of the tunnel networks that connected the underground cities. They spent the last 6 months before the bombardment building all of this, working around the clock while Zarthak forces gathered in orbit. What happened to them? The original 50,000? Elena's expression darkened. Most died in the first few years. The Zarthak didn't just glass the surface. They sent troops down to hunt for survivors. It took everything we had to fight them off. She led them to another display, this one showing records of the early years after the bombardment. Sarah read reports of desperate battles fought in narrow tunnels, of humans using improvised weapons against alien soldiers. The Zarthak gave up eventually, Elena continued. They decided Earth was truly dead and left only a few automated monitoring stations. That's when we really began to build. Dr. Webb was studying the technical specifications displayed on one of the screens. These atmospheric processors, the fusion reactors, the tunnel boring equipment. This is all incredibly advanced, more advanced than what we had when we left Earth. Your ancestor and her team were geniuses, Elena replied. They didn't just preserve old technology. They improved on it, made it better. Everything they built was designed to be maintainable and upgradable by future generations. Sarah walked over to a display showing the current status of all 53 underground cities. Each one was marked in green, indicating it was fully operational. Millions of people living and working in a network of cities that spanned the globe. How did you stay hidden from the Zarthak for so long? She asked. Careful planning and a lot of luck, Elena admitted. We learned to mask our energy signatures to make our communications look like natural background radiation. And we made sure never to do anything on the surface that might attract attention. Marcus joined them, carrying a tablet filled with intelligence reports. That's changing now, though. The Zarthak are preparing for the final harvest, and that means they're paying more attention to supposedly dead worlds like Earth. How much time do we have? Sarah asked. Hard to say exactly. Maybe 50 years, maybe less. But there's something else you need to know. He activated the central display, showing a map of Zarthak territory that was far more detailed than anything Sarah had seen before. It showed fleet positions, supply lines, and most importantly, targets. We've been preparing for this war for 10,000 years, Marcus continued. Not just hiding and surviving, actually preparing to fight. Elena nodded. Every Unbowed child learns to fight before they learn to read. We've developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter Zarthak advantages, and we've been sharing that knowledge with resistance groups across the galaxy. Sarah studied the map, noting the symbols that marked known resistance cells. There were hundreds of them, scattered across dozens of star systems. This is a full-scale intelligence network, she realized. You've been running a shadow war across half the galaxy. Exactly. But until now, we couldn't do more than harass them. We needed real military power. Ships that could take on Zarthak dreadnoughts, soldiers who could assault their fortress worlds. Lieutenant Torres, who had been quietly studying the displays, spoke up. What kind of resistance are we talking about? How organized are they? Elena smiled grimly. Let me show you. She activated another screen, and suddenly they were looking at what appeared to be a live video feed. It showed a group of aliens Sarah didn't recognize working together to sabotage some kind of industrial facility. This is happening right now, about 300 light-years from here, Elena explained. The Cathera were enslaved by the Zarthak about 2,000 years ago. They've been conducting sabotage operations ever since. The screen switched to another feed, showing a space battle between small, fast ships and a much larger Zarthak vessel. And this is the Free Fleet of Andara, human refugees from one of the border colonies that was destroyed 500 years ago. They've been raiding Zarthak supply convoys. Sarah watched in amazement as feed after feed showed different resistance groups conducting operations across the galaxy. Some were alien species fighting to free their homeworlds. Others were human colonies that had managed to stay independent. All of them were united in their hatred of the Zarthak Empire. How do you coordinate all of this? Dr. Webb asked. Marcus grinned. Very carefully. We use a communication network based on quantum entanglement, completely undetectable by Zarthak sensors. Messages can travel instantly across any distance. And it all runs through Earth? Sarah asked. Through the underground cities, yes. We're the hub of the entire resistance network. That's why your return is so important. We can provide intelligence and coordination, but we need your military strength to actually win this war. Sarah nodded, understanding the scope of what they were being asked to do. The Exodus fleet had always planned to fight the Zarthak, but they had expected to do it alone. Now they were being offered the chance to lead a galactic rebellion. What about the other human colonies? She asked. The ones that managed to stay independent? Elena's expression grew sad. Most of them have been destroyed over the centuries. The Zarthak have been systematically hunting down any human settlement they could find. There are maybe a dozen left, scattered across the outer rim. But they're part of the resistance network? The ones that survived are, yes. In fact, one of their leaders is here now. She arrived yesterday for the planning conference. Elena led them to another section of the complex where Sarah could see more people moving around. These weren't unbowed, she realized. Their clothes and equipment were different, more like what she was used to seeing in the Exodus fleet. "Commander Chen Nakamura," Elena called out. "I'd like you to meet Captain Lisa Park of the New Sol Colony." A woman in her 40s approached, wearing a uniform that was clearly military but unlike anything in the Exodus fleet. She moved with the confidence of someone used to command, and Sarah could see the same hard edge in her eyes that she recognized in Elena and the other unbowed. "Commander," Captain Park said, extending her hand. "It's an honor to meet someone from the legendary Exodus fleet." "The honor is mine," Sarah replied, shaking the offered hand. "How many people are in your colony?" "About 500,000, spread across 3 different systems. We've been on the run for 2 centuries, staying ahead of Zarthak hunting fleets." Dr. Webb leaned forward with interest. "How have you managed to stay hidden for so long?" Captain Park smiled grimly. "By never staying in one place too long, and by making sure every Zarthak ship that finds us never lives to report it." Sarah was impressed. Here was another group of humans who had not just survived, but had thrived despite constant Zarthak pressure. "What can you tell us about current Zarthak capabilities?" she asked. "They're stronger than they've ever been," Park replied. "But they're also overconfident. They think they've won. That's going to be their weakness." Elena activated another display, showing detailed intelligence on Zarthak military forces. "This is what we're up against. Over 10,000 major warships, including 50 dreadnoughts capable of destroying entire planets. Millions of smaller vessels. Ground forces numbering in the billions." Sarah studied the numbers, feeling daunted despite herself. The Exodus fleet was powerful, but they were still heavily outnumbered. "But," Marcus continued, "they're spread thin. The Empire is huge, and they need forces everywhere to keep their subject species in line. If we can coordinate our attacks properly, we can hit them where they're weak." Captain Park nodded. "The key is timing. If we can get all the resistance groups to strike simultaneously, we can overwhelm their ability to respond." Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people had spent millennia preparing for this moment. They had kept the flame of resistance alive when anyone else would have given up. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Everything," Elena said simply. "Your ships, your technology, your people. But most importantly, we need you to be the symbol that unites all the resistance groups." "Symbol?" "The return of the Exodus fleet," Captain Park explained. "It's become a legend across the galaxy. Every enslaved species knows the story of the humans who escaped Earth and promised to return. Your arrival is going to inspire rebellions on 1,000 worlds." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. They weren't just being asked to fight a war. They were being asked to lead a galactic revolution. "We'll need to bring the entire fleet into the system," she said finally. "All 2,000 ships. Can your underground cities support that kind of operation?" Elena smiled. "Commander, we've been preparing for your return for 10,000 years. We can support a fleet 10 times that size if necessary." "And the Zarthak? Won't they notice 2,000 ships suddenly appearing in the Sol system?" Marcus activated another display showing the locations of Zarthak monitoring stations throughout the system. "We've been gradually taking them out over the past few weeks. By the time your main fleet arrives, they'll be blind." Sarah nodded, making her decision. "Then we do it. We bring everyone in and start planning the largest military operation in galactic history." Elena extended her hand. "Welcome to the Resistance, Commander. It's time to finish what our ancestors started." As Sarah shook Elena's hand, she thought about all the humans who had died defending Earth 10,000 years ago. They had bought time for the evacuation fleets to escape, believing they were sacrificing themselves so that humanity might survive. They could never have imagined that their sacrifice would lead to this moment, that their descendants would return, not just to reclaim their homeworld, but to free an entire galaxy from tyranny. The war was about to begin, and this time, humanity would not be fighting alone. The war began at exactly 12th Universal Standard Time on a Tuesday. Across 300 star systems, resistance forces struck simultaneously at Zarthak installations. In the Kepler sector, human raiders destroyed a supply depot that had been feeding the alien war machine for centuries. In the Andromeda Spiral, enslaved aliens rose up against their oppressors, using weapons smuggled to them through the resistance network. On the fortress world of Zarak Prime, underground fighters detonated explosives that collapsed an entire military academy. Sarah stood on the bridge of Retribution's dawn, watching as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The main screen showed a tactical display of known space, with green lights marking successful operations and red ones indicating battles still in progress. Strike Force 7 has taken the Rigel shipyards, reported Lieutenant Torres. Strike Force 12 is engaging the fleet at Proxima. Heavy resistance, but they're holding their ground. What about the primary targets? Sarah asked. Mixed results, replied Captain Rodriguez. We've successfully destroyed 18 Zarthak command centers, but they're responding faster than we expected. They're already moving reinforcements to protect their key installations. Sarah nodded grimly. The plan had always been ambitious. Hit the Zarthak Empire simultaneously on hundreds of fronts, destroying their ability to coordinate a response while inspiring rebellions on enslaved worlds. But no plan survived contact with the enemy, and the Zarthak were proving more adaptable than anyone had hoped. Ma'am, called out Commander Hayes from the communication station. We're receiving a priority message from Earth. Elena's face appeared on the screen, her expression serious. Behind her, Sarah could see the organized chaos of the underground command center. Commander, we have a problem, Elena said without preamble. The Zarthak are moving to accelerate the final harvest. They're pulling back their fleet from the outer territories and massing it at their core worlds. Sarah felt her blood run cold. The final harvest was their ultimate fear. The Zarthak planned to strip every habitable world in the galaxy and eliminate all non-Zarthak life. How long do we have? According to our intelligence sources, maybe 6 months. They're panicking because of our coordinated attacks. They've decided to abandon their expansion plans and focus on destroying everything they can't control. Dr. Webb, who was monitoring the communication, leaned forward. That's impossible. The final harvest was supposed to be at least 50 years away. They don't have the infrastructure in place. Elena's expression grew even more grim. They're improvising. Instead of the careful, systematic approach they originally planned, they're just going to glass everything, burn every world to ash, and sort out the useful bits later. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking furiously. They had started this war to prevent the final harvest, but their success had actually brought it closer. What's the target list? She asked. Elena consulted a tablet. Every world with significant biological resources. Earth is actually near the bottom of the list, since they think it's already dead. But the major human colonies, the Cathara homeworld, the free systems in the Centauri cluster, they're all marked for immediate destruction. How many people are we talking about? Billions. Maybe trillions if you count all the enslaved populations on Zarthak worlds. Sarah opened her eyes and looked around the bridge at her crew. These were good people who had followed her into the most dangerous military operation in galactic history. Now she had to ask them to do something even more difficult. Elena, can the Resistance Network get us real-time intelligence on Zarthak fleet movements? Already working on it. We're redirecting every spy, every sensor array, every hidden listening post we have. But Sarah, even if we know where they're going, how do we stop them? They have 10,000 ships, we have maybe 3,000, counting all the resistance forces. Sarah turned to Dr. Webb. Marcus, how long would it take us to analyze the intelligence, data, and identify the most critical targets? If we're talking about disrupting their entire war machine, weeks, maybe months. We don't have months. Sarah made her decision. We're going to have to split our forces. Some ships continue hitting their infrastructure. Others focus on intercepting their harvest fleets before they can reach their targets. Captain Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, that spreads us very thin. We'll be fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously with limited support. I know, but it's the only way to buy time for the populations they're targeting to evacuate or defend themselves. Elena's voice crackled over the communication system. Commander, there's something else you need to know. We've been in contact with some of the enslaved species in the core systems. If we can get weapons and supplies to them, they're willing to revolt. Even if it means their own destruction, they want to hurt the Zarthak as much as possible before they die. Sarah felt a chill at the desperation in Elena's voice. The scope of what they were asking was becoming clear. This wasn't just a military operation anymore. It was a race to save as many lives as possible before the galaxy burned. How many ships? Can you spare for supply runs? Elena asked. Sarah looked at her tactical display, calculating rapidly. Maybe 200. Fast ships that can get in and out of Zarthak territory without being detected. That's not nearly enough to reach all the enslaved worlds. Then we prioritize. The worlds with the largest populations, the ones with the best chance of successful revolt. For the next 6 hours, Sarah worked with Elena and the Resistance leadership to coordinate the largest military operation in galactic history. Ships were assigned to targets across hundreds of star systems. Supply runs were planned to deliver weapons to enslaved populations. Evacuation routes were established for civilian populations that couldn't defend themselves. The scope of it was staggering. Sarah found herself responsible for the lives of billions of people she had never met, fighting an enemy that wanted to exterminate all life in the galaxy. Ma'am, Lieutenant Torres interrupted her planning session. We're receiving reports from Strike Force 15. They've engaged a Zarthak harvest fleet at the Vega system. Sarah turned to the main screen, which showed a real-time tactical display of the battle. 12 human ships were fighting desperately against a Zarthak force 3 times their size. Can we send reinforcements? She asked. Negative. All other forces are committed to their own operations. Sarah watched as one of the human ships exploded in a flash of light. Then another. The remaining ships continued fighting, but they were clearly outmatched. Strike Force 15. This is Retribution's dawn, Sarah said into the communication system. You are authorized to withdraw. The reply came back immediately, the voice strained but determined. Negative, Command. There are 2 billion civilians on Vega Prime. If we withdraw, they all die. Sarah felt her heart break a little as she watched the tactical display. These were her people, her responsibility, and she was sending them to die. Understood, 15, give them hell. Roger that, Command, it's been an honor. The last human ship disappeared from the screen 30 seconds later, but not before taking 2 Zarthak vessels with it. The alien harvest fleet continued toward Vega Prime, where 2 billion people waited for death. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. In some places, the resistance forces were winning. In others, they were dying heroically to buy time for civilian evacuations. And in too many places, they were simply losing. Commander, Dr. Webb called out, studying intelligence reports. I'm seeing a pattern in the Zarthak fleet movements. They're not just randomly attacking targets, they're following a specific route. Sarah joined him at a station, looking at the star charts he had displayed. What kind of route? They're moving inward toward their core systems, but they're stopping to harvest resources along the way. If we could predict their path, we could intercept them. Sarah felt a spark of hope. How long would it take you to calculate their probable routes? Give me 12 hours and access to all our intelligence data. You have it. Elena, can you route all resistance intelligence through Dr. Webb's station? Already done, Elena's voice replied. Sarah, there's something else. We're getting reports of mass surrenders in some of the outer systems. Entire planetary governments are giving up rather than fight. Sarah wasn't surprised. The Zarthak had ruled through fear for millennia. When faced with the choice between a quick death and a slow one, many chose to submit. And the enslaved populations? About half are joining the revolt. The others are too frightened or too broken by centuries of oppression. Sarah nodded grimly. She had hoped for more, but even half of the enslaved populations represented millions of potential fighters. Ma'am, Commander Hayes called out. Priority communication from Captain Park. Lisa Park's face appeared on the screen, her uniform, torn and stained with blood. Behind her, Sarah could see the bridge of a ship that had clearly seen heavy combat. "Commander, we've just finished engaging a Zarthak force at the Tau Ceti system," Park reported. "We managed to destroy their harvest ships, but we lost 6 vessels in the process." "How many civilian lives did you save?" "About 800 million. But there's something you need to know. The Zarthak ships we destroyed were carrying something new. A weapon we haven't seen before." Dr. Webb leaned forward with interest. "What kind of weapon?" "Some kind of biological agent. When their ships were destroyed, it was released into space. It killed everything it touched. Plants, animals, even bacteria. The entire planet's ecosystem is dead now." Sarah felt sick. The Zarthak weren't content with just destroying infrastructure anymore. They were developing weapons that could sterilize entire worlds. "Any idea how it works?" "Our scientists are analyzing the samples we managed to collect, but preliminary results suggest it's some kind of artificial virus, designed to break down biological matter at the molecular level." Sarah closed her eyes, imagining the scope of what they were facing. Not just military defeat, but the complete extermination of all life in the galaxy. "Captain, I need you to get that data to Elena immediately. If the Zarthak are deploying biological weapons, the Resistance Network needs to know about it." "Already done, Commander. But there's more. We intercepted communications suggesting they're planning to use these weapons on Earth." Sarah's blood ran cold. Earth was supposed to be safe, protected by its apparent lifelessness and the stealth technology hiding the underground cities. "How long do we have?" "Unknown, but probably not long. They want to make sure there are no hidden human populations that might cause trouble later." Sarah turned to Captain Rodriguez. "How many ships can we pull back to defend Earth?" "Maybe 50, if we abandon some of our current operations." It wasn't nearly enough. Sarah realized that they were facing an impossible choice: defend Earth and let billions die on other worlds, or continue their galaxy-wide operations and risk losing humanity's birth world forever. "Elena," she called out. "Emergency conference. All resistance leaders, all fleet commanders. We need to discuss our options." "Understood," Elena replied. "But Sarah, whatever we decide, we need to decide fast. Our intelligence suggests the Zarthak are accelerating their timetable even further. The final harvest might begin within weeks, not months." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They had come this far, fought this hard, sacrificed so much. They couldn't give up now. "Then we'll just have to work faster," she said. "If the Zarthak want to burn the galaxy, they're going to have to get through us first." The war was escalating beyond anything anyone had imagined. Entire star systems were dying, billions of lives hung in the balance, and humanity found itself leading a desperate fight for the survival of all life in the galaxy. But they were not giving up. They had survived the destruction of Earth, endured 10,000 years of exile, and returned stronger than ever. Now they would prove that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. The galaxy was burning, but from those flames, something new might yet rise. The Zarthak homeworld hung before them like a malevolent eye, its surface covered with massive fortress cities that stretched from pole to pole. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet in concentric rings, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Sarah stood on the bridge of Retribution's dawn, watching as the combined human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Behind her flagship came nearly every ship humanity could muster: 800 vessels from the Exodus fleet, 300 from the underground cities of Earth, and another 200 from the surviving colonies scattered across the galaxy. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled, but it still seemed pitifully small compared to the defenses of Zarak Prime. "Sensor report," Sarah ordered. "Detecting over 5,000 defensive platforms," Lieutenant Torres replied, his voice tight with tension. "Each one equivalent to a heavy cruiser, and there are at least 200 Zarthak warships in close orbit." Dr. Webb, studying the tactical displays, shook his head in dismay. "The mathematics are clear, Commander. Even with all our technological advantages, we're facing odds of nearly 10 to 1. Sarah nodded grimly. They had known this moment would come eventually, the climactic battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. But the intelligence they had gathered over the past months had revealed something that changed everything. "Elena," she called out over the communication system. "Are you picking up the signal?" Elena's voice came back from the command center on Earth, tense but determined. "Confirmed. The Doomsday device is active. If Zarak Prime is destroyed, it will trigger a chain reaction that could sterilize half the galaxy." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking about the impossible choice they faced. The Zarak had built their ultimate weapon into their own homeworld. If humanity destroyed the planet, they would also destroy billions of innocent lives on worlds throughout the galaxy. "What's, the status of the infiltration teams?" she asked. "Teams Alpha and Beta have successfully penetrated the outer defenses," reported Captain Park over a secure channel. "But the approaches to the planetary core are heavily defended. We're taking significant casualties." The infiltration plan was desperate, but it was their only hope. While the main fleet engaged the orbital defenses, small teams of the best soldiers from both the Exodus fleet and the underground resistance were attempting to reach the planet's surface and disable the Doomsday device from within. "Ma'am, Commander," Hayes interrupted. "We're receiving a communication from the Zarak flagship." The main screen flickered, showing the bridge of a massive alien warship. The creature in the center was clearly Zarak, tall, reptilian, with scales that glowed with an internal light. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the ship's computers. "I am High Commander Zarak of the Hegemony. You are the ones, called humans, are you not? The vermin who fled from their burning nest 10,000 cycles ago?" Sarah stepped forward, her jaw clenched with anger. "I am Commander Sarah Chen Nakamura of the Terran Defense Forces. We've come to end your reign of terror." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "End our reign? You miserable creatures have cost us much with your pitiful rebellion, but you cannot win. Even now, our harvest fleets are sterilizing your resistance worlds. Soon, every trace of non-Zarak life will be purged from the galaxy." "Maybe," Sarah replied. "But we're going to make you pay for every life you take." "You still do not understand," Zarak continued. "This world is protected by the final protocol. If you destroy us, you destroy yourselves and half the galaxy. With us, we have become living gods, creatures of such power that even our death brings devastation." Sarah felt Dr. Webb's hand on her shoulder. "Sarah," he whispered. "I've been analyzing the alien communications we've intercepted. There's something you need to know about the Zarak." She gestured for him to continue. "They weren't always conquerors," Webb said quietly. "According to their own historical records, they were enslaved for over 1,000,000 years by an even more powerful species. When they finally broke free, they swore never to be slaves again." Sarah stared at him in shock. "They're doing to the galaxy what was done to them?" "Exactly. The entire empire, the conquest, the slavery. It's all born from their own terror of being enslaved again." Sarah looked back at the alien commander on the screen, seeing him with new eyes. Still a monster, still responsible for billions of deaths, but a monster born from suffering. "Hi, Commander," she said slowly. "What happened to your oppressors? The ones who enslaved your people?" Zarak's expression changed, showing something that might have been surprise. They destroyed themselves, became so consumed with control that they turned their weapons on each other. "Why do you ask this?" "Because you're following the same path. You've become what you once hated." The alien was silent for a long moment. Then his scaled features hardened. "We became strong. We became survivors. And we will never be slaves again. By making slaves of everyone else. By ensuring our security through the elimination of all threats." Sarah realized there would be no reasoning with this creature. The cycle of oppression had gone on too long, become too deeply ingrained in Zarak culture. "Then we'll have to stop you," she said simply. Zarak's laugh was bitter. "Try, little human, but know that you fight not just us, but the laws of physics themselves. Even if you somehow defeat our fleets, the death of this world will trigger energies that will crack planets across 1,000 systems." The communication ended, and Sarah turned to face her crew. Around the bridge, she could see the same determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. "All ships," she said into the fleet communication system. "Begin the attack. Remember, we're not just fighting for humanity today. We're fighting for every species the Zarthak have enslaved, every world they've destroyed, every life they've taken." The human fleet moved forward, their ships spreading out in a complex attack formation. Sarah watched as the first wave of fighters engaged the outer defensive platforms, their enhanced reflexes and advanced weaponry allowing them to hold their own against superior numbers. "Infiltration teams, report status," she called out. "Team Alpha has reached the planetary surface," Captain Park reported, her voice strained. "Heavy resistance, but we're making progress toward the core facility." "Team Beta is pinned down in the upper atmosphere," added Commander Chen, one of Elena's best operatives. "Requesting fire support," Sarah turned to her weapons officer. "Target those defensive platforms. Clear a path for Team Beta." The main guns of Retribution's Dawn spoke, with a voice like thunder, their enhanced fusion beams punching through Zarthak shields and armor. Around the fleet, other human ships were doing the same, their coordinated fire slowly grinding down the alien defenses. But the cost was terrible. Sarah watched as ship after ship disappeared from her tactical display, their crews dying to buy. "Time for the infiltration teams." "Ma'am," Dr. Webb called out urgently, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the planet's core. I think they're preparing to trigger the Doomsday device manually." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. If the Zarthak activated their weapon now, while the infiltration teams were still trying to disable it, everyone would die. "All teams, you need to move faster," she said into the communication system. "They're about to trigger the device." "Understood," Captain Park replied. "We're at the facility entrance now, beginning final assault." On her tactical display, Sarah could see the dots representing the infiltration teams moving deeper into the planet's core. Around them, the space battle continued to rage, with human ships fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. "Commander?" Lieutenant Torres called out. "Multiple Zarthak reinforcement fleets detected. They're jumping in from across the galaxy." Sarah watched as her tactical display filled with new red icons. Hundreds of alien ships, arriving to defend their homeworld. The odds, already impossible, had just gotten worse. "All ships, defensive formation. We hold this position no matter what." For the next hour, the human fleet fought the most desperate battle in their history. Ships died on both sides, their wreckage falling toward the planet below like metallic rain. Sarah lost count of how many vessels they had lost, how many friends and comrades had died, but they held the line. "Team Alpha to Fleet Command." Captain Park's voice crackled over the communication system. "We've reached the core control room, beginning shutdown procedures." Sarah held her breath as she waited for confirmation. Around her, the battle continued to rage, but everything depended on what happened in the depths of Zarak Prime. "Something's wrong," Captain Park reported. "The shutdown isn't working. The device is too deeply integrated into the planet's core systems." Dr. Webb was working frantically at his station, analyzing the data being transmitted from the surface. "Sarah, I think I understand what's happening. The Doomsday device isn't separate from the planet. It is the planet. The entire world has been converted into a weapon." Sarah felt despair wash over her. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, only to discover that their enemy's ultimate weapon couldn't be disabled. "There has to be another way," she said. "Wait," Webb continued, his voice excited. "There might be. If we can overload the planetary core, cause a controlled implosion instead of an explosion, we might be able to contain the destructive energy." "What would that require?" "Everything we have. Every ship, every weapon, all focused on a single point on the planet's surface, and the infiltration teams would have to trigger the overload from inside the core." Sarah understood what he was saying. It was a suicide mission. The teams on the surface would die, and probably most of the fleet as well. "Captain Park," she called out. "Did you copy that?" "Confirmed, Commander. We understand the requirements." There was a pause. Then Park's voice came back, steady and determined. "It's been an honor serving with you, Commander. Tell Earth we did our duty." Park, wait, but the communication was already dead. On her tactical display, Sarah could see energy readings spiking in the planet's core as the infiltration teams began their final mission. "All ships," Sarah said, her voice heavy with grief. "Target the coordinates Dr. Webb is transmitting. Everything we have, everything we are. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone the Zarthak have oppressed." The human fleet opened fire as one, every weapon focused on a single point on the planet's surface. Beams of energy that could vaporize mountains struck the same location over and over, boring deeper and deeper into the planet's crust. On the surface, the infiltration teams completed their mission, manually triggering the overload that would turn the planet's own power against itself. The end, when it came, was surprisingly quiet. Zarak Prime simply collapsed inward, its massive bulk imploding in a cascade of gravitational forces that contained the destructive energy within the planet's own mass. The Doomsday device, meant to devastate half the galaxy, instead consumed only the world that had created it. Sarah stood on her bridge watching as the homeworld of humanity's greatest enemy disappeared into a sphere of twisted space-time. Around the fleet, the surviving Zarthak ships began to surrender, their empire's heart cut out in a single decisive blow. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Torres reported quietly, "we're receiving surrender requests from Zarthak forces across the galaxy. The word is spreading fast. Their homeworld is gone." Sarah nodded but felt no joy in the victory. Too many had died to reach this moment. Too many friends and comrades had sacrificed themselves for this victory. "Elena," she called out over the communication system. "It's over. The Zarthak Empire is finished." Elena's voice came back, thick with emotion. "What about the enslaved populations? The resistance fighters on the occupied worlds?" "Free," Sarah replied. "All of them free." Over the following months, Sarah watched as the galaxy slowly began to heal from millennia of Zarthak oppression. Enslaved species reclaimed their homeworlds. Refugees returned to planets that had been stripped bare and began the long process of restoration. Humanity, too, began to rebuild. The great ships of the Exodus fleet settled into orbit around Earth, their crews finally able to walk on solid ground for the first time in their lives. The underground cities opened their doors to the surface, and humans began the process of restoring their homeworld's atmosphere and ecology. Sarah stood in a field outside New Paris, watching as children played in grass that had been planted only months before. The sky above was blue again, filled with clouds that carried rain to water the growing plants. It would take centuries to fully restore Earth, but the work had begun. Elena joined her, looking older but more at peace than she had during the war years. "Any regrets?" the older woman asked. Sarah thought about all the friends she had lost, all the difficult choices she had been forced to make. "Many," she said, finally. "But not about this, not about coming home." "The Resistance Network wants to establish a galactic council," Elena said, "representatives from every species, working together to make sure something like the Zarthak Empire never rises again." Sarah nodded. "What do they want from us?" "Leadership. You've become a symbol, Sarah. The human who led the galaxy to freedom. People trust you." Sarah looked out at the children playing in the grass, thinking about the future they would inherit. A galaxy where different species worked together instead of enslaving each other. A universe where strength was used to protect rather than oppress. "I'll do it," she said, "but not as a conqueror, as a servant." We've seen what happens when one species thinks it's superior to all others. Elena smiled. "I think that's exactly what the galaxy needs." As the sun set over the restored fields of Earth, Sarah reflected on the long journey that had brought them here. 10,000 years ago, her ancestors had fled this world as refugees, carrying with them only their determination to survive and return. Now their descendants stood victorious, not just as conquerors, but as liberators. They had broken the cycle of oppression that had plagued the galaxy for millennia, replacing it with something new. Something better. The charred remains of home had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one where different species worked together, where strength was tempered by wisdom, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. It was not the ending anyone had expected when the war began, but it was, Sarah realized, the ending the galaxy deserved. Humanity had come home at last, and in doing so, they had helped the entire galaxy find its way home as well.